I'm standing near a huge pond or lake, depending on what you want to call it. Here you can see the remains of what used to be a wall, and then steps going down to the water. And this must have been very beautiful at the time of Angkor Wat, which should be down to my right on the other side of the road, I think. See, this is a pretty area for people to come in and pick. It's hot today, right around 1 o'clock, but it's not that steaming, oppressive heat of Bangkok. Not to mention the noise and the incredible amount of smoggy smoke from every source you can think of in Bangkok. And these holes seem to suggest that there was some kind of either decoration or railing on top of this wall, and it's possible the wall goes deeper than this grade. According to the map, Angkor Wat is surrounded by a much wider moat than is Angkor Thom, and this would reflect that. But I think the South Gate Road from Angkor Thom to Angkor Wat seems to be off to the west farther than I anticipated. If that's the case, then this causeway is to Angkor Wat. I believe that is Angkor Wat. So this is the entryway and the causeway, or bridge, it might have been at its time, I don't know, of Angkor Wat. Now here we can see a remnant of the wall as it originally was, with the main wall here and then a walkway there and then steps leading down to the water, which is very typical of waterways here in Southeast Asia, at least in Thailand. I'm thinking that this was a causeway and did not have a bridge in it, which is interesting to ponder what kind of defensive strategies are necessary for a causeway versus a bridge. A bridge gives you a natural defense. You raise it, they got to walk across water. Here, you have to be very, very positive of your ability to defend the causeway. And it's possible that that middle building area or construction area, we see just the remnant of it, perhaps was another substantial gate and more defensive, very much like the gate, if you will, of the Knights Templar in North Poland. Now it looks like the original causeway is underneath, and they've just brought in new blocks and built this right side to be very smooth for tourists, and then the left side they've kind of slopped in. Now this central area doesn't look like it was anything other than a viewing area for looking down the moat, which in its own right is a very pretty pond lake area, very reminiscent of Versailles. And you wonder if the king did not have on this moat for his entertainment, and others perhaps. It's interesting to imagine that centuries ago somebody stood here where I'm standing with their hand where my hand is, just contemplating the same view that I am, only in pure original colors. And what would their station in life have been in order to even be here? Were the ordinary allowed, or did you have to have some degree of rank? And did these gates and these steps and the special areas of steps serve any particular real function, or were they simply an architectural design element, a traditional one? There's apparently a wedding party that's celebrating with antics. There's some large Naga heads serving as railing end posts. Side temple. Notice a tremendous profusion of windows, constantly giving beautiful views of probably both the temple and of the surrounds. Now remember, we're just still at the outer wall of the Angkor Wat complex, I believe. Here another idea of the columns, this one with more decorations, detail if you will, in the rings. And inside a standing Buddha. Again, probably these holes held more columns to complete these arcades, if you will. By the different elevations, maybe just design. Here a relief pattern that probably blanketed these walls, or at least as a wainscoting trim. So each of the niches or windows might have been filled with these columns. Interesting. We're looking through the center part, way down to the other end. There's the married couple recently, way down there. Again, it appears that there was just this motif and some design elements below. Whether there were paintings or just a sheer clean wall above, I don't know, but you'll notice there's a trim line up at the top there where it reaches that ceiling height, if you will, before the arch begins. Nothing particularly interesting about these arches. I wonder if they had decorated these arches more elegantly than they appear right now. And once you were through the entranceway, if you panned about, looked about, you would have this view. Presumably all of this open area had either buildings in it, and there are some evidence of structure. Is some evidence. You would look down this long causeway to Angkor Wat, the structure itself. And of course the same on the other side. And maybe even a wedding party. Railings and long causeways approaching the castle, or in this case the temple, seem to me to be one more example of those things that occur simultaneously in all times as well as all cultures. And every few hundred feet are another stairway access to this open area, which may well, like the palaces that we saw, I think the Rose Palace was called in Russia, St. Petersburg, would have held beautiful gardens for roaming about at leisure. I don't know, guessing. Or maybe there were structures like this smaller temple here and its companion across the way. And perhaps, and I'm just guessing, on celebration days when the king made a procession down this walkway, elevated walkway, thousands and thousands of the million who populated this area might have been arrayed down below us here and cheered or did whatever you do when somebody that powerful goes by. And here a nicely decorated pony. Now here, as we get closer to the temple, are another pair of smaller ponds on either side of the causeway. We can't go straight ahead now, but if we could, this is what you would be looking at. More lithe, slim lions than we've seen before. Nicely decorated short columns. How pretty a view this must have been when it was original. I wonder if there were colors, or did it just look pretty much like this restored portion of this lion. Even still, it would have been quite lovely. And perhaps the shadows would have given us more detail. Now we're on the first tier. Here we climb to successively higher tiers. This is apparently a reflection of the universe, the moat reflecting the universe and its dimension or its limits, and the highest temple reflecting Mount Metu, I think it's called. The other temples that we'll see reflecting other mountains not as high. Again, rather than pictorial detail, there is more graphic or symbolic design elements, if you will, but not totally. Here it looks like we have nagas delineating these slightly different elevations between balconies. And up above, there may be, in those panels, beings indicated. How pretty these, what we would call turned columns are in the windows. And notice they're flanked by perhaps princesses. It's interesting what kings could call harems, we would call something else. These kings could have empathized with Hugh Hefner. He would have been one of the boys. Ought to be one of the boys. The reliefs on this wall, and I'm reading from the interpretive plaque, represent the concluding episode of the Mahabharata, or however you pronounce it, a renowned Indian epic tale. I think there were two. And it's the Battle of something or other, when Pandava and Kaurava clans meet in the final deadly combat. Unlike the Ramayana epic, the second of them, this one has appeared to have apparently faded from the culture, but not here. So let's spend some time and see what we can see here. Certainly a chariot there, horses beneath, an elephant here. Notice that device that he's carrying. He has it in his right hand. Is it some kind of a weapon? This reminds me of the Battle of Hastings tapestry that you can see in Bayeux, France, that depicts this sort of event. Now here we have something. Certainly the prize, the head of an enemy. Perhaps several of them carried on. Or are those just soldiers with their heads tipped back? Don't know. Notice the color red there, still visible. So these were apparently painted. And here, held on spears, how is it? A personage of some sort. Here, some dancer or god. Notice there the shield. Remember, these things teach us also what were the designs of clothing and weapons and stances and so forth. Here another shield showing how it's held on. Notice it's very similar to what the Roman phalanx ground soldier used, infantry soldier used. Now here our dancer looks like he's running, as do a couple of another figure behind him to the left. Notice the blanket or the covering, whatever, for that horse's back. And we can see the harness rather clearly. And does this suggest that a lesser person drove the chariot while the warrior wielded the bow? A different kind of stance. Here it looks like the man on the right is not having things going his way. Here we can see a man about to die. His hair held by the warrior in his left hand while he prepares to drive the spear into him. Pleasant stuff. And in front of him, a couple of other fallen warriors. So this seems to suggest that the direction of the battle has been decided. Notice the pose of the horse. Is it leaping forward in the exaltation of the attack, or is it out of raw fear? And look at our warrior facing backwards, a spear about to be driven into his right shoulder. It looks like the horse may have had something driven into its neck. Notice this pose. And take a look at the form of these weapons. Were they knives or clubs? Here are two men that are carrying probably a totem, unless that's a shield. But it looks like they're carrying something hanging on a post. Notice how large the elephant is here compared to anything else in the picture. This line of soldiers here is curious. Most of them are looking to the left, but the one in the center faces us, the one to his left faces right, then the one on the left of him faces left, then the other forward, then the other left, then the other right. Why? What's the significance of that? So quite a masterpiece when you can think of it. At the corner of the building, more reliefs telling some kind of a story.
Pray to the God.
Here it looks like they're paddling in a boat. Maybe those are umbrellas. Again, if we understood the story, it would make sense. This section of bas reliefs reflects a series of historical events from the reign of King Suryavarman II. It's thought that these reliefs were sculpted shortly after the king's death. Here are the handmaidens fanning him, but also notice the umbrellas. So this gives us an idea of what the tools were, the people were, that would have been on those terrace platforms that we visited this morning. And notice what looked to be scribes. Here a procession of people that appear to be carrying things which are probably gifts. Notice a tub of something there. Vessels of something, maybe some fruit in that basket. And here, ivory tusk. And here the king. Now up above those smaller reliefs below are large reliefs, probably of the king or someone important, some focused point of the event. Here a man throwing a spear, he has a shield, and the person riding the chariot has unleashed an arrow apparently, but yet still has something in his right hand. Notice the stance that the man in the back is able to take. One foot on the carrying device, and it looks like one foot resting right above the tail of the elephant. Okay, now it's not the tail. We can see that it's some part of this carrying device, a protrusion that sits on the elephant's back. It even has this part coming up in the back, which may be an allusion to a naga. So he was able to stand on basically what was one continuous, probably solid platform. And notice the elephant's mammut sits not on that apparatus, but literally as usual, right on the elephant's back, right behind his head, with his feet up next to his ears. It even appears that the king, while riding, or where it was, had umbrellas to keep him from the sun, and those fans to keep him cool. Here a more relaxed pose suggesting the tough work is done. Don't know what these people are carrying. Are they symbols of something? Like this right here almost looks like a pipe, but probably isn't. Those look like those bells that hang from the wehans and make noise in the wind. This may be a ceremonial club or something like that. These reliefs that stand out a little bit do so because people have rubbed them, usually the guide. So they probably had something important that he was saying that I don't have any clue about. In spite of the fact that these are supposed to reflect events, and I'm sure they do, the graphics seem to be highly redundant. Okay, the reliefs in this gallery represent the 37 heavens and 32 hells derived from Indian tradition. The hells on the lower registers pictured in greater detail than the heavens above. Each hell is in fact identified by an accompanying inscription. Thus we read, Avasi Raravar, blah blah blah, names still known and feared in Cambodia today. So here we can see the righteous on the path upward to heaven, and here those who are not so righteous, I think, being pummeled by that larger person into the depths of hell. To suggest that this duality is reflected in European medieval and Renaissance art would be jokingly simplistic. It is almost oppressively in that religion's art. And to carry out this horror of hell are the big demons that are well armed. There's a cat, a lion to chew on you. There's other animals there too for whatever reason. Here a person being dragged, probably whether they want to be or not, into hell. Here's some kind of looks like a naga, the kind that, notice how this one on top is issuing out of the mouth, I think, of the one below, which looks more like a lion. And it's got a grab on this dude's left leg. These people appear to have collars around their neck. Certainly their arms are lashed together at the wrists and the elbow. And these characters, whose the hair of one is held by the big dude, are all lashed together by the neck. Notice the elephant has at least one person, if not two, impaled on his tusks and or in his trunk. Here a couple of people drawn by the neck where they've been lashed. On the other hand, up above we see people happily apparently carrying their revered gods or whatever, and carrying offerings, etc. Here's some people being trod underfoot. Here a man dragged by his foot and a lashing to his foot as the others are pulled by ropes that are tied, it looks like, to their nose or their mouth. This panel reflects subservience. Now this section seems to reflect a king in the center or some lordly person, people to his right looking happy, contented, armed, unfettered, while the people to the right look like they're about to be heavily beat upon, and the king is poking his magic wand at them as much as to say, you guys are in trouble. So now we have two panels that are spreading the joy of hell. Here some being tossed deeper into the bowels of it. Two human beings suspended from trees by their ankles. Well, one by his ankle, one by his wrists probably. The concept of the amoral demon, the demon who can do these things to people in hell and have no conscience to be burdened with, reminds you of the SS at the concentration camps of the Nazis. And for the rest of the way, these have been pretty badly deteriorated. And notice this archway, a walkway that parallels the inscriptions.